The metallic screech and wailing sirens exploded through the narrow corridors of the Prometheus 3 station. The air smelled of scorched metal, ozone, and blood, a sharp, salty scent, almost like rusted iron.
Commander Eric Valentine, tall and lean in a battered Reconcord uniform, was dragging the wounded Sergeant Dilrenok.
Blood seeped through Eric's clenched fingers, dripping in thick, dark drops onto the metal floor. He moved forward with clenched teeth, his eyes bloodshot from smoke and exhaustion, but still carrying a spark of wry humor deep within them. Why is it that goodness is punished more harshly than evil? Maybe because goodness is a challenge to a system that has grown used to pain. Deal groaned, clutching at Eric's sleeve.
Commander, leave me.
Eric let out a strained half-laugh.
Shut up, soldier.
If I leave you behind, who's going to tell me all those idiotic jokes later? He tried to smile wider, but his lips only twitched in a nervous spasm. Somewhere down the corridor came a dull, violent impact, as if the station itself were buckling under pain.
The plating shivered, showing sparks like a metal ring.
And then Eric saw her.
Through the smoke and flickering red lights, a tall silhouette slowly emerged.
The glare of the alarms danced across her body, making her appear at times like a living woman, and at others, like something mythical and otherworldly. She was slender yet powerful. The scales on her skin shimmered like ocean waves, deep blues shifting into vibrant greens. Black, obsidian-like horns swept back from her head, slender and sharp, forming a kind of dark crown. Her face was sharp, angular, the high cheekbones throwing deep shadows across her features. But it was the eyes that caught him most. Enormous, turquoise, glowing faintly from within, both predatory and heartbreakingly vulnerable. She froze a few meters away from them, her breathing audible even through the shriek of the alarms, heavy deep. In her hand, she held some strange device that glowed with a gentle blue light. Eric quickly set Deal down and drew his plasma pistol. "Don't come closer," he shouted. "You one of them?" Her lips twitched. When she spoke, her voice was unexpectedly low and melodic, with a subtle vibration like a double bass string. "Humans, you judge everything by appearances. Why do your gazes leave wounds deeper than any weapon?" He tensed, ready for combat, but something in her voice gripped him. There was no threat there, only pain. Why do we fear those who differ from us only in skin or the shape of their eyes? Maybe fear is just a mirror reflecting our own shadows. She stepped closer. The scales along her body quivered slightly, like tiny ripples across water. Suddenly, an enormous chunk of the ceiling broke loose above them. Eric shouted, shielding his head with his arms. But before the metal could crash down, she lunged forward, throwing herself over him, covering his body with hers. A steel panel slammed into the floor just inches away from them. Eric found himself lying beneath her, breathing heavily. He felt the weight of her body, her chest rising and falling rapidly against his back, her breath cool yet oddly warm at the same time. She pulled back quickly, her tail sliding across the floor with a faint hiss. He tried to laugh through his ragged breathing. "And this is what you call not coming closer." She tilted her head slightly, the dark horns casting strange shadows on the walls. "We have a different concept of personal space." He smirked, wiping blood from his cheek. "Yeah. Well, I guess we now share the same concept of dying under debris." She froze, studying him intently. Her eyes narrowed like those of a predator observing prey. Yet something else glimmered there, something unexpected. She spoke slowly. "I am Sai'Kala. I am exiled." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Well, perfect. We have discounts for exiles around here. Though first we should probably figure out, exiled for what exactly?"
Sai'Kala lowered her gutse.
It seemed as though her scales darkened, as if a shadow passed across them. "For doubt. For weakness." Her voice wavered. "But if you die here, everything I tried to protect will die with you." He straightened up slightly, leaning heavily against the wall. "And what exactly is that?" She said softly. "A chance that your kind and mine might finally stop killing each other." Eric stared into her eyes for a long moment. Then he spoke, exhausted but with a spark of irony. "I had that idea too, but it seems like we're both in the minority." She nodded. "A minority sometimes shapes the future." Footsteps echoed from around the corner. The corridor exploded with new lights. Soldiers in recon corps armor stormed into the space. Leading them was Captain Rhodes, his face twisted with rage. Valentine. Step aside. That creature's Xur.
Sai'Kala tensed.
Her claws slowly extended from her fingers, and the air thickened with predatory threat. Eric sharply threw out his arm, blocking the soldier's path. Hold it. She's not attacking. Rhodes snarled through his teeth. She is the attack. Just look at her. Eric gestured toward Sai'Kala. And so what? Personally, I think she's pretty damn impressive. Everyone froze, including Sai'Kala. Her eyes widened slightly. Impressive, she echoed, tilting her brows. In human language, that's a compliment. Well, we'd prefer a little less hornage, but I'm flexible. Rhodes raised his voice.
Valentine, she's en alien.
We don't even know what's going on inside her head. Eric glared at him with weary fury. And what do you know about what goes on inside a human head?
We fight wars out of fear, not out of truth.
Rhodes lifted his rifle. Sai'Kala let out a low growl and raised her claws slightly. Humans seem weak, but why do their eyes leave wounds inside me deeper than any claws? At that moment, the ceiling trembled again. The station's voice roared overhead. Warning.
Threat level, critical.
Oxygen levels dropping. Section will be sealed in 90 seconds.
Eric exiled.
Okay. We have 90 seconds to decide whether we're going to kill each other, or get the hell out of here together. Sai'Kala slowly lowered her claws. Her eyes locked onto Eric's. Together. Eric nodded. He turned to the soldiers.
Exites that way.
Anyone coming with me, move it. Anyone who's not, feel free to stay here and die. Rhodes hesitated, then spat out.
Damn you, Valentine.
You're in charge. Sai'Kala effortlessly hoisted Deal with one arm like a doll. Eric stared at her in wonder.
You're strong.
She looked at him seriously. I have to be. Otherwise, I'd have been killed long ago. They bolted into the corridor, beneath the wailing sirens, through falling ceilings and clouds of sparks and smoke. Why do we always judge by what we see with our eyes? Maybe the scariest monster lives not in her, but in ourselves. Their silhouettes vanished into the pulsing glow of emergency lights. The sirens quieted, giving way to a heavy, suffocating silence. Yet between them, a spark had already ignited, strange, frightening, but very much alive.
Prometteux, 3 groans under the weight of explosion, like a wounded animal tout l'on driven to the brink. Metal walls shivered and cracked, shedding sparks and thin dust. Eric Valentine led the way, gripping a flashlight.
Its narrow beam sliced through drifting smoke, catching glimpses of twisted pipes, sagging bulkheads, and steel panels hanging like broken teeth. Behind him moved Sai'Kala, carrying the wounded Deal in her arms. She moved quickly, but there was a tremor in her powerful frame. Her breathing was sharp and uneven. The scales along her shoulders rippled, tensing and relaxing in quick bursts. Why am I walking beside her, as though she were human? Why do her eyes feel more honest than the eyes of people I've served with for years? He turned to look back. Sai'Kala met his gaze and instantly looked away. In the depths of her turquoise eyes flickered something fragile, like thin ice about to crack. She was the one who spoke first. Her voice was low and slightly guttural. Why did you stay? Eric looked at her and gave a tired half-smile. Because I'm an idiot. And because I believe not everything is lost. She nodded slowly, though her expression was clouded. Among us, people like that are killed.
The ones who believe not everything is lost.
They entered an emergency hatch. The door slammed shut behind them with a metallic shriek. Inside, the air smelled of grease, heated metal, and something sharp, like blood. Eric gently lowered Deal onto the floor. He pulled a small scanner from his belt and waved it across Deal's chest. He's got an artery hit. If I don't stop the bleeding, he's done. Sai'Kala stepped closer and held out a tiny metal cylinder, etched with faint glowing runes. Take this.
Med probe.
It will seal the vessels if you act quickly. Eric took the tool. Their fingers brushed against each other. Her claw-tipped fingers were cool and textured like rough stone. His were warm, trembling slightly. Why is it that even in the worst chaos, a single touch can feel so important? He sliced through Deal's armor plating, baring his chest where blood pulsed in a dark well. Sai'Kala crouched low beside him, her face hovering near Eric's. He could feel her breath, a mix of coolness and something metallic yet alive. "Hold him." Eric barked. She wrapped her long fingers around Deal's shoulders, pinning him to the floor with surprising gentleness. Though she was strong enough to crush his ribs, her touch was careful, almost tender. In my culture, a touch is a vow. You never touch someone whose soul you're ready to betray. So why am I touching him? A human. Eric drove the med probe into the spurting vessel. The device glowed a soft blue. Blood slowed, then stopped entirely. Deal's breathing grew more stable. Eric let himself collapse to sit against the wall, his hands dripping crimson. He sucked in a ragged breath and said, with a wry, trembling smile, "You didn't have to help. Why did you?" Sai'Kala stared at him intently, her scales trembling as though her entire body shivered. "Because I no longer want to be just a weapon." He nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. In his eyes flickered exhaustion, and a strange gentleness. "And what's it like, being more than just a weapon?" She lowered her gaze. "Painful. Very painful." She crouched beside him. For a moment, both were silent, listening to the slow, labored breathing of Deal. Eric fished a canteen from his belt pouch and held it out to Sai'Kala. "Drink. It's water. With minerals." She took the flask. She sniffed it cautiously, then lifted it to her lips. A few shining drops slipped down her scaled neck, catching the beam of the flashlight like liquid stars. "It tastes strange. Like salty dew." Eric let out a short laugh. "Sports drink. Humans call it healthy lifestyle. Though honestly, tastes like unicorn piss." She snorted, a low rumbling sound that turned into a laugh. It was deep, vibrating like the distant roar of some great beast. But there was a lightness in it that hadn't been there before. Eric watched her intently. Then, in a softer voice, he asked, "May I?" She frowned slightly.
May you what?
He reached out and slowly brushed a finger across one of the scales on her cheek. It was cool, firm, but beneath it, he felt a surprising softness, like velvet over a hidden warmth. She closed her eyes, as if allowing him into a private space no one had entered before. Her breath caught in her throat. "Why do I let him touch me? Why does it feel right?" He whispered.
"You're beautiful."
She opened her eyes and tilted her head. "In my culture, we don't use that word. To us, beauty means the ability to protect." He gave a crooked grin. "Maybe that's why I like you." She lowered her gaze. And suddenly, her voice fell to a whisper. "You know, I was sent here to punish your people." He froze. "And now?" She spoke, her voice trembling.
"I saw your eyes. I saw you weeping over your dead."
And I realized, we have more in common than we've been taught.
Suddenly, a red impulse raced across the walls. A voice from the ceiling boomed out.
"Warning. Order issued to terminate enemy agent.
Name, Sai'Kala. Danger level, extreme."
Eric jerked his hand away. Sai'Kala stood motionless, like a creature cornered. Her tail swayed slowly, tense as a whip. He breathed out, strained. "That is about you?" She wouldn't look at him. "Yes." He clenched his fists, voice cracking with anger. "So all this, it was a lie." She suddenly grabbed his face with her cold, clawed hands. Her eyes burned like twin turquoise flames. "No. This is the only thing that's not a lie." She was shaking, the words clawing out of her chest.
Everything else is war.
"Everything else is orders. But what I feel next to you, that's real." He was struggling to breathe. Tears trembled in his eyes. He pulled back, covering his face with one trembling hand. "I thought freedom was merely the right to speak. But freedom is the right to love someone you're not supposed to love." She stared at him, almost pleading. "Think only about what you have seen with your own eyes. Not what they tell you. Can love truly be a bridge between worlds? Or is it just a weapon that will destroy us all?" Footsteps echoed from beyond the bulkhead. For soldiers burst into the compartment, rifles raised. At their front stood Captain Rhodes. His voice was low and deadly calm.
Valentine.
Step aside. Right now. That's an order. Sai'Kala closed her eyes. Her lips trembled. She looked as though she was ready for death. Eric took a tiny step forward, and planted himself squarely in front of her, his shoulders squared like a living shield. The room fell into a silence so sharp it hummed like a taut wire. Silence hung in the compartment like a tightrope pulled to the point of breaking. Red warning lights pulsed along the walls, casting a bloody glow across human faces and the scaled skin of Sai'Kala. For soldiers kept their rifles trained on Sai'Kala. She stood behind Eric, claws half extended, but there was no rage in her gaze, only resignation, like a creature accepting its cage. Captain Rhodes spoke in a voice so quiet it sliced through the air like a knife.
Valentine.
Move aside. Now. Eric didn't budge. He stood firm, his body held like a shield of flesh and blood.
No.
Rhodes clenched his jaw, his voice snapping like a whip.
She's the enemy. She's not the enemy.
Eric's voice was hoarse but ringing with steel. She could have killed all of us. But she didn't.
She saved me.
She saved Dale.
Rhodes swung his arm in frustration, shouting.
She's exiled.
They're all the enemy.
Eric stepped closer.
His face trembled, as if a hurricane was raging behind his eyes.
And what about us?
Are we any better? How many years have we been killing them, without ever asking why? Behind him, Sai'Kala spoke softly, her voice barely rising above a whisper, like wind moving through reeds.
Because Firis always tronge den raison. The soldier faltered.
Their faces went pale as marble. One of them, a young man whose eyes were wet with tears, whispered. But she saved the commander.
A weak moan rose from the floor.
Deal Rennick, pale as death and still smeared in blood, opened his eyes. His voice came out in a raw rasp, torn by pain.
Commander, she saved me.
Rhodes stiffened, slowly lowering his rifle by a fraction. What did you say? Deal tried to smile, but it was stained red with blood.
She's not a monster.
The monster is the one who kills the hand that tries to save them. Sai'Kala took a hesitant step forward. Her scales shimmered faintly, as if lights were moving beneath the surface of a tranquil ocean. I don't want war. I'm tired of being a weapon.
You want to be Soméon Real.
The station shuddered violently, a deep vibration like the roar of a colossal beast.
The floor cracked.
An ear-splitting howl of sirens rose around them. A mechanical voice thundered overhead. Warning. Enemy fleet KSIR has initiated attack.
Station surface under heavy fire.
All personnel to evacuation. Eric cursed under his breath, tilting his head back as though pleading with the ceiling. Shit. They came anyway. Sai'Kala recoiled, every line of her body stiffening in horror. Her eyes flicked wildly.
No.
They weren't supposed to. I sent them a signal not to attack. Rhodes stared at her as if looking at a ghost. So, you're a traitor to them as well? She nodded, her voice cracking, ice breaking beneath it. They want me dead now too. Because I said humans are not the enemy. Eric pressed both hands to his skull, struggling for breath. Images flashed in his mind. Battles, blood, propaganda, and the sight of Sai'Kala's eyes, so deeply human in their pain. What makes us traitors? Our hearts or our duty? Can love be a bridge if soldiers with guns stand upon it? Suddenly, Eric straightened. His voice broke out like a shout against the storm. If any of you want to live, you'll listen to her. She knows how to stop this attack. Sai'Kala was shaking, tears streaking the grime on her face. There's a code phrase. A command that disables the fleet's attack protocols. But it has to be broadcast from the central communications hub. Only then will they stop. Rhodes threw his arm out, furious. That's suicide. Eric shouted right back. Either we all die, or we try. He grabbed Sai'Kala's hand.
Take me there.
The station around them screeched and cracked, the metal shrieking under unseen pressure. They ran. Sai'Kala tore ahead, her tail whipping behind her, deflecting sparks and debris. She glanced over her shoulder at Eric. Careful. Collapse on the left. Eric nearly stumbled as a massive steel beam plummeted toward him. Her arm snatched him by the chest, yanking him to safety. Ahead of them, the corridor caved in entirely.
A colossal beam crashait down, blocking the way.
Sai'Kala froze, her chest heaving. Panic clawed into her voice. I don't know what to do. Eric seized her by the shoulders and pressed his forehead against hers.
Listen to me.
You are not a monster.
You savais du S.
You're braver than anyone I've ever known. Her lips quivered. I'm afraid they'll kill us both. He whispered so softly it was barely audible under the thunder of explosions. Then at least, let's die as ourselves.
Note étranger.
She closed her eyes.
Drew inhalons, shaking breath.
When she opened them again, there was no fear left, only a fierce blazing resolve.
Hold on to me.
She wrapped her arm around his waist and lunged at the wall, claws flashing. Steel crumpled under her blows.
Panel tord à part like paper.
Sparks and metal fragments rained around them like a meteor shower. Can love become a weapon against hate? I'm ready to become that weapon. They burst into the central communications hub. All around them, fires crawled over consoles. Electrical arcs hissed and snapped through the air.
Through a giant observation window, the battle outside raged. Ships exchanging plasma fire. Explosion blooming like violent flowers in the vacuum of space.
Sai'Kala rushed to a central console. Her claws danced across the glass panels with frenetic speed. She spoke in her own tongue, her voice turning low and primal, like thunder rolling over distant mountains.
Et la rue Katanshiri.
Screens blinked and shifted. Red combat indicators turned yellow, then green. On the displays, star maps froze in place. The Xur fleet stopped moving. A metallic voice echoed through the chamber. Command cancelled. Fleet disengaging. The station shook one last time, but this time, it felt like the station was exhaling in relief. Captain Rhodes stumbled into the communications hub, his eyes wide. He stared at the empty radar screens, at the Xur ships pulling away into hyperspace. He whispered, God. You actually did it. Sai'Kala turned toward him, her face shining with a strange inner glow. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I don't want war. I want us to stop fearing each other. Eric slowly faced the security cameras still recording and broadcasting across the station. He raised his voice so it would echo everywhere. If anyone can hear me, we just ended a war without firing a shot. Because love doesn't ask for orders. Because strangers aren't always the enemy. And because fear is nothing but a mirror reflecting our own shadows. Silence swallowed the room. Then, on one of the screens, a signal flickered. A voice boomed from the speakers.
Dissert Central Command.
Cease all hostilities. The order to terminate Xur agent Sai'Kala is rescinded. Rhodes lowered his rifle. His lips trembled as he exhaled. Sai'Kala stepped closer to Eric. She looked at him as though seeing the sun for the first time. Her voice broke into a fragile whisper. So we're alive.
Eric logued through tears. Alive.
Around them, the station slowly quieted. Smoke thinned. From far away came the shouts of rescue crews, technicians calling out status reports. Metal bulkheads still groaned, but the sirens were fading. Eric and Sai'Kala stood together before the massive observation window. Beyond the glass, stars glimmered like a billion tiny lanterns. The Xur fleet was retreating, fading into the dark. Eric stared at her for a long time in silence. Then he said, softly,
You know this is just the beginning, right? Sai'Kala tilted her head.
The beginning of what? He reached for her hand. Her clawed fingers curled into his. He squeezed gently, as if holding something precious and breakable.
The beginning of US no longer being étranger.
Sai'Kala slowly leaned forward and touched her forehead to his. From her skin came a faint coolness, but also a warmth, as though she carried an entire universe beneath her scales. In my culture, that means, you're my home. He closed his eyes, voice barely a whisper. And you're mine. Wars are started by those who fear change. But love always breaks down walls, even when those walls span an entire galaxy. And for the first time, the stars outside the window didn't look cold and infinitely foreign. They looked vast, full of possibility and light.